Welcome to the Cash Rich Exit podcast, Self-Made Nation of CEO founder business owners. I'm Colleen O'Connell-Campbell, wealth advisor at RBC Dominion Securities, and your host. Today, we're crossing the Atlantic, at least as far as ideas are concerned, to explore how employee ownership trusts, or EOTs, have reshaped the exit landscape in the UK and what that might mean for Canadian founders now that similar legislation is on the books here at home. Legislation that was informed by the UK. My guest, UK-based exit strategist and business mentor, Christine Nicholson. She has worked with owners to build, scale, and transition businesses using an EOT structure to protect both legacy and liquidity. She noticed my content and reached out to me through LinkedIn. The power of social media. And as a quick side note, she's not here to solicit your business if you live outside of her jurisdiction, nor am I here to solicit any type of business from those who live outside of Canada. Now, as you listen, and keeping that in mind, I invite you to imagine what an employee ownership exit might look like in your business. And if you're wondering whether your current plan leads to a cash-rich exit and you live in Ottawa, Ontario, or Canada, in particular, Ottawa, Ontario, reach out to me for your one-on-one wealth gap analysis so we can map it out together, it being your cash-rich exit. Welcome, Christine, all the way from across the ocean.
Yeah, and like we've just been discussing, it's winter here, and which can be very. I think we have a not dissimilar experience, but this activity is the thing that puts a smile on my face when it's really miserable outside.
Yeah. So we're recording in January. It's cold here in Ottawa, sunny today, but cold. And we'll probably be listening to this sometime in this spring, perhaps the April time period. Doesn't really matter. What we're talking about is evergreen in nature.
Absolutely.
And I'm so grateful that you could join us, Christine. So before we get into talking about exits and employee ownership trust, which is our topic of the day, I think it would be great for you to share a little bit about how your career has progressed and why you're in this area as a business mentor, consultant to business owners, in particular in the UK.
Okay. So when I was a kid, I only wanted to do two things. I wanted to be a barrister, and I wanted to follow my dad in the Navy. And if I could do those two things together, that would have been great. And but no childhood plan ever really works out. I did actually eventually join the forces. I joined the Navy and discovered that I was really chronically seasick.
That's ironic.
Plan A had to become plan B. And but at this point, I didn't have any other plans. It was go in the Navy, do my service, be really happy, and leave when they kicked me out. And the one piece of advice I got in the military was go and get a professional qualification. And it is something I would have got round to if I'd stayed in. But when I came out, I studied to be an accountant. I actually did go back and do my law degree to scratch that itch and realize that actually what I do now, I really love doing. And so my first job as a qualified accountant was helping a family-owned company that had been through multiple generations actually sell their business. And over 4.5 years, we disposed of nearly 40 companies with every type of exit you could possibly imagine. And it was all because the next generation of the family weren't interested in the business. And the old-fashioned view of the existing family was that, well, if you're owning it, you have to be involved in it. And I think that was actually my first lesson in business ownership is ownership does not mean involvement. It doesn't have to mean involvement. And therefore, it allowed me to really recognize there are actually three exits for most people. So there's exiting the day-to-day, because generally, if you've founded it, you've been involved in the day-to-day. And actually, you take it from A to B, and for your business to go to C typically needs different skill set.
So
So
you're
getting
talking
out of
about
the
like the founder or the owner
day,
manager type of
yeah, owner, it's typically owner managed businesses
mhm.
by their definition are generally restricted in their ability to grow by control, i.e., the owner wants to control
Mhm.
everything, and therefore and has a restricted span of control. Which brings us on to the second exit, which is actually not being in control, because you can not have a day job and still control the business. You
Right.
be a
Mhm.
director, albeit you could be a non-executive director. You set the strategy, you set the vision, and you attend a board meeting. So you want to get out of that as well, because frankly, there'll be a point where you don't want to do it. And actually, you also that you are as an owner holding the business back. And then, of course, there's the third exit, which is the transfer of shares, which is fundamentally what we're going to talk about
Right.
today. And so doing this 40 exits in 4.5 years, it really gave me that insight about these three magic stages of exit, particularly in a family-owned company. And actually, I switched the lights off on that company. I mean, I was literally the last one out, handing the keys back to the landlord, and I wrote my own check, my own redundancy check,
Right.
which I then immediately banked and started my own what I call grown-up business. I'd done hundreds of side hustles before, and now I was running a business where we borrowed a lot of money from the bank, and it was big enough that it exceeded my span of control, and I had investors and shareholders. And I very quickly realized that whilst I'd strived my entire career to be a managing director, the misery, I hated it.
Oh
And
no.
and funny enough, I speak to so many founders who, when
Mhm.
they get to, having a team of employees, they feel the same. Like being in that job just makes them really miserable. And it's a size, I would say it's a sizable minority of people that are like that. And I really understand the feeling. Because then you've got to start thinking about, okay, how do I make myself happy? And that's where the getting out of the day-to-day comes from. And then over the years, I sold that business, founded another, sold that, founded another, sold that. And so over a decade or so, I founded, and I love the startup and I love the thrill of the chase. I don't really like the day-to-day boring doings. And I realized that now I'd got quite a lot of exits underneath my belt. And one of the things that people were coming to me for was helping them exit their businesses. And so I kind of fell into it. It wasn't something that I thought I got out of bed one day and said, this is what I'm going to do. It was like
Right.
people asked me for my help. And I found that this was a source of great joy. And yeah, I was speaking to a journalist a couple of weeks ago, and they said, if you weren't doing this, what would you do? And I said, I'd be doing this if I wasn't being paid.
There you go. That's
We should,
that's, there's no better testament then,
yeah,
right? But all the
yeah,
better if you are being rewarded financially
yeah.
for the impact that you're having. Yeah. So I had never thought about it, exits in the way that you described the three exits or even the three phases of exiting for an individual. It's possible, I suppose, to go fully to sort of the third phase, but oftentimes it's more of a gradual progress. But we put a lot of focus on that third phase, so that's really interesting. Interesting. Um, I guess what really brought us together was that highlighting the employee ownership trust structure, which is
Yeah.
what I'd really like to dive into with you today because this structure is very new in Canada. So legislation was brought into place to include some, I'll say, interesting tax incentives for the exiting business owner to take this structure seriously. And it's a structure that's been available for, I guess, maybe phase two or phase three of that one, two, three exit. So
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about that a little bit more. Maybe you could take us to when that became a viable option, first of all, in the UK that you recall?
So employee ownership, forget the trust bit for a minute, but
Right.
employee ownership it's been common in the UK for, I would say, thousands of
Hmm.
years,
Hmm.
because commonly in the early days of commerce, before things got to, limited companies and all of those kind of things, then it tended to be that if people wanted to scale their businesses, they either took enormous risks because they were making extraordinary profits, because they were risking their own capital, or they came together in cooperatives. And a cooperative is a kind of form of employee ownership.
Hmm.
But way back and way back in the early 1900s, we have businesses in the UK that were founded in the early 1900s that have always been employee owned. It's just the way it's been structured has been that the employees are a beneficiary of the shares and profits
Right.
of the businesses. But in 2014, the government at the time in the UK actually established something called an employee ownership trust, which allowed um, uh, business owners to sell the shares in their business to a trust for the benefit of their employees.
Hmm.
And what that meant was that if we think about a timeline, the shares get sold to a trust that's literally just been set up and has no resources. So, how does the business owner get their money? Well, they get their money out of the future profits of the business up until they've hit the value of that business on that day that they transferred the shares. So, value now paid for out of future distributable profits. And then when that value has been achieved, then now the employees now share those distributable profits. And the quid pro quo for the owner to wait for their money was that there would be no capital gains tax, no income tax. I mean, it was literally a zero tax effect.
And that was from the get-go of
Yeah,
that particular structure. Okay.
yeah, absolutely. And now, like all good things, there'll always be bad people who find a loophole.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of loopholes in the way the legislation was written. So the spirit of it was owner wants to retire or move on to something else, gives the business to his employees because he's got a management team in, and he gets paid out up to the value that he's created. And I use he, can be she. I just happen to mainly work with male clients, but he then gets his money in retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
And the delay is because normally when you're transferring your shares, then the transfer price, regardless of when you get the money, that's when the tax hits.
Right.
So to avoid the tax hitting for somebody who would have received technically no money, then this is where the 0% tax regime comes.
And the risk that there is some kind of negative consequence and
Yeah.
the owner doesn't get paid out the
Yes. Yeah.
full amount or has to go, depending, I guess, how it's written, the owner goes
Yeah.
back into the business or whatever might take place there. Okay,
And
that's
and
interesting.
and if we just go into the psychology of this for a second, you've handed over your major financial asset as a business owner, but you haven't received any of the money for it. Are
Hmm.
you going to disappear on a tech-free world-round cruise, or buy the yacht that you've got and then actually have no contact with that business which you're expecting to provide you? You're going to be all over that. Now, the
Probably.
challenge and one of the loopholes is that a business owner could sell the shares, get the money tax-free, and still run the company,
Mm.
which meant that all he was doing was kicking the can down the road for succession planning.
Hmm.
So in the global spirit of EOT, and I hope that this is what the Canadian legislation's spirit and intention is, because it certainly was ours, and it seemed it would work really well, is the business owner decides at some point he's going to sell his shares to the employees or under a trust, which means that employees can come and go without any of the burden of
Right.
getting shared certificates back. But he would build a management team such that at the point where he transfers the shares, the management team are equipped.
Yeah,
Take the
that is
business
the
forward.
spirit of things, the management
Yeah,
team. There's a whole governance structure, and we have a number of consulting firms that I've actually had here on the podcast that are available to be engaged by the company to go through this due diligence process to determine if the EOT structure is the right structure.
yeah,
If maybe not now, what needs to happen to in order for it to be the right structure in terms of a governance and a transition, making sure there's the right bench strength and stuff like that. So that
yeah,
is definitely part of the spirit of things.
yeah.
Um, so it's been around now, coming up to 12 years.
Years,
Am I
yeah,
doing my
yeah.
yeah, 12 years. So um, that would mean that there have certainly been likely some very interesting win-win scenarios, which is the
Oh, yeah,
intention, as well
yeah.
as some spectacular failures. So rather than going into, case studies and examples, would you have top of mind like what might be a couple of spectacular win-wins and a couple of downright ugly free falls?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, really, anybody who ever remembers any of the spaghetti westerns from the 1960s may remember the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the good being Clint Eastwood at the time. So there's definitely been some good, there's been some bad, and there's been some ugly. So let's look at the bad first, because I like focusing on the good. So let's get the bad
Yeah.
out of the way.
Yeah.
The bad, this is a clear example of a business owner who did all the transaction, sold his business to an employee trust without telling anybody in the business, no consultation. And he walked into his business, sold it on the Friday, walked into his business on the Monday, literally threw his keys on the desk and said, "Don't muck up and make sure I get paid." And the people in the business had no idea what an EOT was. So they had no idea what the structure was. They had to find that all out for themselves. This is a really bad way
Hmm.
of doing it. So the ugly is a almost similar situation where there was no consultation until about the last 2 weeks before the transaction went ahead. The business owner then went and did a presentation to his employees saying, by the way, we're going to an EOT. This is what an EOT means. And actually, communication wise, it was handled pretty well. But the team that he had in place wasn't
Hmm.
anywhere near strong enough.
Hmm.
And literally, the day he handed over, he disappeared from the business at all and let them get on with it. Now, the reason why this was really ugly is because he didn't get his money and the company went into liquidation.
Right. And so
And it went,
the employees didn't benefit either then at the end of
no,
the day.
and it took 14 months. So 14 months from beginning to end.
Hmm.
And actually, that example is what happens when a business owner doesn't make exit plans. So
Hmm.
don't forget the fact that it was an EOT. When the business owner just disappears, whether it be death, disease, disability, divorce, ugly EOTs,
Yeah.
when they're street and then the team isn't strong enough, then that's what happens to the business. And typically, from the business owner disappearing or being unable to work effectively in their business to liquidation is on average 12 months. So so there are some things that you can't just wake up tomorrow and say, "Oh, I think I'll have a lovely EOT. Let's do it within," because the actual transaction itself takes literally a couple of weeks. I mean, it's some legal paperwork. There's no due diligence really, but it's how effective it's
But
going to
to
be
have a
when you're
successful EOT
yeah. And
takes
here's
intention.
yeah. So
Hmm.
when you go in with the right intention and you have good communication with your employees, even in a really competitive environment where the last thing you want is for your competitors to know all about this, the real successes have been building a strong team. Might not be the perfect team, but at least it's got 70% there. Doing the transaction in such a way that you've clearly communicated with your team so that they know what to expect.
Hmm.
Elevating their expectations because not only have you told them what you're doing, and that this will only be a success if they elevate themselves. You give them the opportunity to elevate themselves. And with one of my clients, we went from completely owner managed to absolutely burned out owners who really hated and resented the business, who are now only working part-time, really energized by the business, that they're doing really great things as employees within their business. They've elevated their team, they've recruited a few new members, but now you've got a whole cohort of people. They've achieved their long-term target of being the biggest player in their, biggest market share in their industry sector in quite a complex environment. And their employees are asking questions or making statements like, hold on a minute, if you do that, that's going to cost us this much, and that will reduce the employee bonus pool. And so, when they've got like 400 of these tasks that are all reducing the bonus pool, people are going, oh, right, yeah, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
And
Or how can I make this more efficient?
Absolutely.
Right.
You get a team if they understand the link between the EOT and how it rewards them. They say, how can I make this better? They self-edit other members of the team that aren't pulling their weight, where maybe they would have tolerated that in the past. They don't tolerate that anymore. They bring in people that they know are going to add value. They actively become part of their own recruitment process. So you get candidates from internal recommendation. So you're now saving recruitment fees. Sorry, all the recruiters that are listening to all of this. But actually, recruiters could really benefit from understanding about EOT because it would help them work more in partnership with the businesses that they are serving. The entire team within your business suddenly becomes focused on what I call the fact that there's four magic things that I think every business should focus on, and it's everybody's responsibility. And I only know it by the letters CPRO. So C, cash. P, profit, R, revenue, and O, order book, or other. Sometimes I call it other because the order book might not be the thing for you. There might be some other factor that when you put those four
Specific
things
to your business and
Yeah.
your environment,
Yeah.
geography, community that might be relevant,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So, I mean, what I've discussed with those working in the employee ownership community here in Canada, that is really important and why the EOT structure, but to your point, it's not as though employee ownership in and of itself has not existed in the past. It's just this particular structure that's getting attention, and I'm putting attention to, in fact. The reality in Canada, north of the border of this really large country that sits below us, is the available funds that out there for buying businesses. So one of the important aspects of the EOT for us here in Canada is to have another potential option for business owners to think about in exiting, such that their business is not bought by a private equity firm or some combination of family office private equity firm that might not have a Canadian focused or community focused attention. So, with the 12 years of experience with in particular, the EOT structure in the UK, what might you want to add to that spirit of the EOT, and what have you seen in the UK where it might come to that, either another country's influence on buying companies, the cash flow, or just generally like a PE focused buyout of businesses?
I hear the question, and I'm going to start off by asking and answering another question. Okay. But it is related to exactly what you've said. So apologies to anybody who thinks that we're going a bit off-piste. If you think about the whole world, one of the biggest challenges is people. So we're in an environment where it's never been so easy and yet so difficult for people to move around the world. Like, it's definitely really easy to go on holiday, but it's not so easy now for people to come in and out of countries. And I don't see that changing in the long term.
Hmm.
So what we need to do is make sure that we don't suffer from a brain drain, but also that we attract the right kind of talent and skills, or as well as providing the right type of talent and skills. And providing talent and skills is a very long-term thing. If you started today, you'd probably get it right in about 30 years, but you need the talent today.
Hmm.
So keeping your talent in your business, keeping the right talent in business is really difficult. It's one of the global challenges. I mean, I look at and study business right across the world, and the number one thing is talent, and the number two thing is funding. But you can kind of solve some of the funding problem, i.e., you can have more cash flowing through your business that's, doing the right things for your business if you're not spending it on constantly trying to recruit staff.
Yeah.
So, and the great thing about EOTs is, an employee ownership in general, is it's a fabulous tool for businesses that rely on specific talent. So here in the UK, for example, the architecture practices, which by their very definition, the training there is extensive. The liability for an architect is extensive. So once you've put somebody through all of that training, you really want to keep them.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's really easy for architects to move anywhere in the world. Because if you're in one of the developed world, in one of the developed economies, then you are going to be sought worldwide. So it's not just a matter of hopping down the road to, competitor LLC. You can go anywhere.
Right.
And so EOTs, within the EOT structures within the last 12 years in the UK, architects and other professional services have absolutely been the fastest growing because it's a way of making people bond within the business, because they can see the benefits of their work product.
Right. Right.
So which automatically then actually will make a successful architecture practice or professional services group. It will make them attractive to PE investment when they get to a
Hmm.
certain size. But then anybody within an employee-owned organization is going to look at the culture of organizations owned by PE, VC, and I personally, even if I was to go back and if I was to go back 30 years, even 30 years ago, I would refuse to go and work for a business that was owned by a particular country. There's several countries on my I won't work for them list. And because of the culture, because of
Right.
the working environment, which is pretty toxic in most cases. Whereas in your employee owned, you're driving the culture. So if you want to attract the right talent, and that means giving people beyond maternity and paternity care provision, or allowing people to take sabbaticals, allowing people to work part-time for longer periods, for just to change their working environment
Hmm.
to retain the talent within an employee-owned organization. Your employees are kind of in charge, and I don't want people to mistake the fact that if you become employee owned, it's turning into a communist revolution, sorry,
No.
socialist revolution,
Right.
where it's like we all turn into some kind of unionized uh, political state, and
Yeah.
everybody gets a vote and their vote is equal. That's not the way EOT works. And if your company was going to be going down that path, then EOT is probably not for you.
Right.
But it does work on setting the right culture, retaining the right talent, setting their own direction, and being able to think globally, but actually behave locally.
Hmm. Because culture being a really big, a really, really big part of that. right?
Absolutely. I can't remember who it was who said that. It's a very famous saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes,
But it
I
is
have
true. I
heard
mean,
that. Hmm.
yeah, and I've seen so many business buyers buy great businesses that are running really well, and then they destroy the culture. And within 2 years, they've lost literally every single employee. And all the things that were not on the balance sheet but
Hmm.
added great value to the business. And it's particularly in the PE arena,
Hmm.
and VC. And people often get VC and PE money mixed up.
Yeah,
But
very different.
ultimately, what you really want, if you're going to look down the PE route, you really want to look at the culture of all the other businesses that they own, because that'll be a
Yeah,
good indication of where you're
right,
going.
right. So it's not, let's not paint all PE transactions with the same paintbrush because it's a pretty broad area.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So whether you are in Canada, well, we're talking to my
Predominantly
audience,
Canadian audience.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, well, Ottawa-based, Ontario, Canada. Um, in your opinion, based on your experience with the EOT structure in the UK, and knowing that we've modeled part of our legislation off of what the UK has put in place amongst some other aspects that we've pulled from the US-based ESOP structure. Um, Generally speaking, this in the spirit, the same idea. If an owner is thinking about this, what might be the best, or what might be some practical steps to be considering in the next 6 to 12 months, if this is what they want to investigate? From your experience, what would be the next best or practical
Oh,
steps?
wow. God, that is such a good question. And I have to come at it from making the basis of some broad assumptions. So let's
Yeah,
go through the assumptions. So I'm going to assume that the business is big enough to have an owner managed element, but you've also got senior employees that will do stuff that you can go away and have 2 weeks holiday. But usually the in an owner managed business, when they've started to recruit staff, they can go away for a week or so, but they couldn't go away for a month or 3 months. So I'm going to assume that that's kind of the environment that we're in, because these are typically
great.
what I
Hmm.
find my EOT clients to be.
Right, like the architects, the engineering, the professional
Yeah,
services
yeah,
group. It's
yeah.
a
So
similar idea here.
so
Yeah.
your business as usual with your existing clients, etc. There's a system there, and it'll go on rails. But new business, new developments, new strategies, bringing in new AI tools, for example,
Hmm.
that won't happen without some form of leadership. And this is the biggest gap, because so the first thing I'm going to give 3 things to do. But the first thing is, from an owner thinking of exiting through EOT, or any other exit for that matter, I want you to think about what it is that you do every day. And it's not necessarily the things that you do, but the things that you think about and the decisions that you make that will not be thought about, or decisions made if you're not there. And then write them down, because this is absolutely a write them down. And because once you've actually written them down, and this is like secret eaters kind of thing. You have to write it secret eaters. You literally have to write everything that goes in your mouth. And there's a TV program here in the UK called
Oh,
Secret
okay.
Eaters, by the way. So they get people, what they do is they set up film cameras everywhere, and then they ask the secret eater to write down everything that they, keep a food diary, and then they compare it to what was filmed,
Hmm.
and it'll come as no surprise. there's a bit of a difference between what they write down and what they have been seen to be
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
And
The,
it's
the bites,
exactly the same.
they're not writing down the bites, licks, and tastes kind of thing, right?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, that
The
I've
handful
finished off
of
my
peanuts
in.
that you grabbed on the way through the counter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That packet of chocolate biscuits that suddenly disappeared from the cupboard. Yeah. All of that. And being a business.
Same idea as the business owner. It's those things you're
Oh,
thinking about
yeah.
in the
Yeah. Yeah.
car while you're commuting to the office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And that actually, you know what? Being in the car, the minute you get home, checking your emails, even if you've got an assistant who's supposed to do it, the sending a quick email off to double check that something's happened, the phoning into the sales director going, have you followed up that call? All of those things. Because literally, those are the things these are the micro turns that create really big movement, but you just don't think about them because you don't think about the 5 Maltesers that you ate just because you found them in the glove compartment of your car.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's being really self-aware and really focused on what it is that you do. So that's the first thing is complete self-awareness about your involvement in the business as a
Yeah.
business owner.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want you to think about, so the second thing is now think about everything that your team does and get your team to write it down. And you may have an organization chart. Some businesses are more sophisticated than others. You may have that organization chart, maybe have roles in it, and there may be job descriptions, in which case, you're already doing really well. But actually be really clear about who's doing what in your business. Because I can guarantee that pretty much every owner managed business has a, oh God, I don't even know the right word for it. Somebody who literally will be like self-leveling cement, papering over all the cracks.
Okay. The
Like they
fixer.
just literally, yeah, and they literally won't let anything fall or fail, which is not helping all of the other people who don't even know that they were supposed to have been doing that, so they don't know that they would have failed.
And that's not a formal job description. That's
Nope.
just an
Yeah, it's a
something that's
behavior.
behavior. It's part of the and maybe part of the culture even.
Yes, absolutely. And it's usually one of your first 5 employees. And often in slightly smaller companies or wherever there's a family member or other family members, it's often another family member, and quite often it's the wife. So because they don't want to see you fail, but equally they don't feel empowered to go and criticize the other people that you've employed. So actually having a realistic view of exactly who is doing what and whether there's somebody who's going around like a little scrubber fish, like these fish that eat all the
Hmm.
parasites of sharks, that kind of stuff. So now you've got these two things and you're making them really self-aware. Now you've got to join the two things together. What would happen in your business if your self-leveling cement person and you weren't in it? And what you need to do then is formalize who really should be doing what and holding those people to account for doing that,
Hmm.
whilst also making sure that it's crystal clear who is allowed to make decisions about things. And if you really look at all the decisions that have been made in your business, you'll find that about 90% of them in an owner managed business are made by the owner, which means that they have a stranglehold. And if you want to go into an EOT, you've got to liberate your employees to empower them to make the decisions. So my recommendation is you do not go in and go, right, you're all enabled to do all your decision making all in one time. That's like asking someone to lift 100 kilos when they've never even lifted a 2 kilo barbell.
Yeah.
So you treat it like a gym exercise. It's literally 1 millimeter today, tomorrow, and then all of a sudden you're not working in millimeters, you're working in centimeters, and then you're working in meters.
Hmm.
And it really comes right down to it. And the reason why most people don't do it is because they can't be bothered with the millimeter by millimeter. They want quick results and they give up too easy. But remember, an inch is a cinch and a mile is a trial. So you don't want to try and travel a mile. Just do focused on the next inch.
Right.
And all of a sudden you'll realize that. So most of my clients come to me, and in the first 90 days, they often complain, oh God, this is going so slowly. It's only the first 90 days. But actually, that first 90 days is all the foundation work. It's
Yeah.
like building those solid foundations that all of those other things are elevated upon thereafter.
And guess what? you could do all of that work and you might not actually move towards an exit, but it would probably, not probably, it will increase the value of the business.
If I can tell you one story, um, I had somebody book, a complete stranger, book an appointment in my calendar. And I'd only just started using these automated tools. And when he came on the screen, it was the classic, he was talking, but he was on mute. But I could kind of tell that he was like angst, he had a lot of angst and anxiety. And by the time he'd pressed on mute, he was still he was mid flow. And he said, you got to get me out of here because do you know what? I am starting to damage my own business. And so we looked at, how much business was worth. We looked at what his team was like. We looked at how it was structured. And this guy had done an amazing thing. I mean, he'd started from scratch and over a quarter of a century had built this business going from paper to a full technology platform and fully understood the market that he was in. And he'd employed over that time a group of people who were, I mean, they weren't just A stars. I mean, they were A double stars. They were all brilliant because he had been really good at picking really good people. And he'd trained them and elevated them. But he didn't recognize an image of himself in them. So he thought, well, if they're not exactly like me, then they can't be my successor. And there was a breakthrough conversation where I said, you don't want another you. You don't want someone who tears it all down and starts from scratch. You want someone who doesn't start down here, but can take this and elevate it.
Yeah.
And he said, the best thing I've ever heard, which was, but I'm afraid. I said, what are you afraid of? And he said, well, first of all, this is my biggest financial asset. What if they fail? I said, well, for a start off, well, you're not going to let them fail, but you are going to let them recognize what failure looks like. But you're going to be the safety net. And so we're going to change your position and your behavior within the business. And he said, oh, I'm still afraid. And I said, what are you afraid of? And he said, what if they succeed? What if they do so much better than I ever did? And I said, yeah, the only reason they're going to do that is because you gave them a great platform to start off and you brought the right people in. This is a good thing, something to be proud of.
Wow, that is, we can talk about all the different technical aspects, but at the end of the day, we're talking about people
Yep.
and, get all into the psychology, which we're not going to. It is really a crucial part of the whole process.
Yeah. I mean, it boils down to trust. And, and there's two sides to that. You've got to trust the people who are going to be running your business. You've got to trust yourself to let go. And, the happy ending to this story is that he has this business that's worth a significant amount of money. It's now worth many multiple times what it was when we worked together. He's got a great MD who he mentors and has a great relationship with. He has gone off and done all of the things on his bucket list and probably a few more. He has got a full market for his business. But I sent him to a wealth advisor, and the wealth advisor said, there's just no way that you could earn the same. And if you sold your business today for what it's worth, there's no way that you could earn the same return as if you just keep owning your business. And, the minute that you want to sell it, there's a ready market for it. It's a fabulous little business. Well, I say little, it's not so little anymore.
No.
But it's a hugely profitable business. And he'll have a whole queue of people wanting to buy it. That won't be an issue. And it runs itself. It's constantly growing and he gets to really enjoy it. And actually, for the first time in, I would say, about 10 years, he's actually enjoying the things that he does within the business, which is very, very little. He's kind of a figurehead and an ambassador. So he gets to do all the fun stuff. And if you think about EOTs, that's what it should be like.
That's what it should be like.
Business owner gets to be the ambassador and he gets to see his legacy. And he gets to see how the team that he selected then really go on and develop themselves. And it's a bit like being a parent. You know, you see your children having their own children who then have their own children. And it's like, I don't know a single grandparent or great grandparent who isn't way more proud of their grandchildren and great grandchildren than they ever showed to their children. Because with their children, they could be proud of them, but they're also like, you know, how do I keep this human being alive? Where with their
Hmm.
grandchildren, they don't have that responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like. That's what it feels like being a business owner when you can see your legacy and you can see what you built and
Yeah.
then stand back and know that it's still looking after itself, like it's a family.
Well, Christine, thank you for bringing your perspective to
Thank
the
you.
podcast here, the Cash Rich Exit podcast. I'm very grateful that you reached out to me on LinkedIn. What a, fabulous tool when it's used appropriately. I like to wrap up my recorded conversations. I know we call it an interview, but really it's more of a conversation with asking for one piece of fun, frank advice for the business owner community, the CEO, founder, business owner, self-made nation. So that could be on the central topic that brought us together of EOTs and employee ownership, or broadly speaking, for the business owner community. What do you want to leave us with? What one main thought, advice?
Well, my one piece of advice now, and I give this all of the time, and it's around exits in general. Hey, as a business owner, your business will not survive if you are the only decision maker. And that being the only decision maker actually makes being in business miserable. Whether it's not, you might not feel like that today, but you'll certainly feel that at some point in the future. So I always want you to ask, what would happen to my business if I was dead? Which I know sounds really miserable, but it's the only way that this question strikes home with any power. And my frank advice would be when you ask yourself, what would happen to my business if I was dead? Start doing something as if you were,
Right.
because that is the one way that your business will survive you, whether you leave for any other reason or whether you actually get through a successful exit. Successful exits are incredibly rare, and but you can set yourself up for success by just asking that question, what would happen if I was dead? And then start taking the action to mitigate the risks of that happening.
That is probably one of the most profound pieces of fun, frank advice here. Christine, before I release you back into the cold, dark weather of the UK, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, where would they find you? And you do have some kind of evergreen resources, a book or something like that that
Yeah,
might be interesting. So if you just share where to find you if somebody wanted to chat with you.
great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So you'll always find me at christinenicholson.co.uk, so co.uk. On there, you'll find all the books that I've written, everything from 5 Minute Finance, which is the business owner's guide to numbers, which I recommend that business owners give to their teams so that their teams can learn, right the way through to how to successfully sell your business, which does have an element in the EOT about it. So, and then there's absolutely hundreds of free resources on my website about how to put together an EOT, the team that you need, the actions that you need, and there's a few workbooks on there as well. But you can also find me all over LinkedIn. When you do see me on LinkedIn, I think I've got an old photo on there where I used to bleach my hair to cover the grey, whereas now there's actually more grey than anything else. But yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on there as been Business Mentor of the Year, which I've won with different awards over several different years. So I'm quite easy to find.
Fine. Thank you so much for being here.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Self-Made Nation, that brings us to the end of today's conversation on employee ownership trusts and what Canada can learn from the UK's experience. brief note here. Christine shared with me that there have been some legislative changes to the EOT tax incentives. The only constant is change. I still think that we need to look at EOTs from a much broader perspective than just the tax. I hope Christine's insights have shown you that a cash-rich exit doesn't have to mean sacrificing your people, your culture, your legacy, especially if you start planning early and choose the structure that truly fits your business and your values. If today's episode has you wondering about your own path to a cash-rich exit, what that will look like, I invite you to connect with me, Colleen O'Connell-Campbell, on LinkedIn. Reach out for your own personal one-on-one wealth gap analysis so we can map out your next best moves, connect you with the right resources. If you found value in this episode, please feel free to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe on YouTube, review so more CEO, founder, business owners like you can find the Cash Rich Exit podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm looking forward to welcoming you back again soon. I'm Colleen O'Connell-Campbell, Wealth Advisor at RBC Dominion Securities, TTFN. Ta-ta for now. And a short note for those who are watching, all opinions expressed by me and any guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinion of RBC Dominion Securities. This show is for information purposes only. Before acting on anything you hear or see, consult a qualified professional. I'm a wealth advisor with RBC Dominion Securities, a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund.